Next, I want to move the story on a wee bit in terms of what's happening up in this particular city. The city that 5, 6, 7 years ago was universally laughed at by the rest of the country because nothing got done. Couldn't get sporting events over the line. Resource consent was an absolute joke. Residents had so much power, so we never got sporting events. Now, all of a sudden, Auckland is among 5 cities shortlisted for the 2014 Sport Business Ultimate Sports City Award alongside Calgary, Copenhagen, London and Melbourne. So what has changed here, and how important is it that we bring these one-off events like Major League Baseball and an All-Stars game, and also the EPL, West Ham taking on the Phoenix at Eden Park in July? We'll catch up with the man in charge of economic tourism and development for the arm of the council, Brett O'Reilly, as we look at events on their way to New Zealand and how important they are to an individual council and city like Auckland. Back soon.
Tony Veitch with Veitch on Sport. Nothing but sport all summer long on News Talk ZB.
Until a few months ago, Auckland had never made the top 30 finalists for Sport Business Ultimate City of the Year. Now it's in the top 4 finalists, as I said, Calgary, Copenhagen, London and Melbourne. And it's not just an Auckland-centric story here, it's part of New Zealand, bringing events like Wellington's done to New Zealand, like we saw with the Nines, and what a success that was, and bringing international events, much like musical concerts, but sporting events like Major League Baseball and an All-Stars game, which we discussed last weekend and got a lot of support from you guys. Well, Brett O'Reilly is the CEO of ATEED, which is the economic and tourism arm of Auckland City, as we continue to look at this whole little issue around sport and business. He joins me now. Afternoon to you, Brett. Let's go backwards here. You know, Auckland used to be, as I said before the break, a can't-do city. What has changed that Auckland has now been recognised on the world stage as far as sport and business is concerned? What's changed?
Tony, I think it's a really good question. I think Rugby World Cup was obviously the major event that brought the city together. And I don't think it was coincidental that happened after amalgamation of the city. So you had the city as one unified entity. You had ATEED leading some of the work on events, but with great support from Auckland Transport, from Regional Facilities Auckland, from the sports and from the rest of the city. So I think Rugby World Cup as the event and then the amalgamation of the city. So we now have this team approach, what Dave Smith at the NRL calls the Auckland effect. And it's special, and it's something that we probably didn't really understand ourselves how powerful it is when you actually get a whole city unified behind a strategy.
Well, what I like about it is you are, and I use this word, but I mean this, you're taking punts on stuff now. You backed the Nines when there was a lot of people who sat back and said, hang on, why are ratepayers funding an event which is completely and utterly unproven?
Well, I think having a 10-year major event strategy, seeing Auckland Council making the call to be willing to invest in that 10-year strategy, and managing as a portfolio is quite important, because like any other investment portfolio, we're able to look at some events which are quite mature, and we know that you can be quite certain of the returns, and then we can also take a calculated risk on other events. So we can look at that whole portfolio and say, hey, we can really always afford to be having a few new events like the Nines, which are really important because we want to have those big established events like the ITU Triathlon, like the ITM V8, but we also want to do some things that are unique to Auckland. And the Nines is one of those, and we're going to have a whole lot more of those coming along.
Well, that's the other aspect, and I did a lot on my programs last weekend, Brett, this potential of Major League Baseball and an All-Stars game November 2016. Now, speaking with Ryan Flynn, as you know, is an absolute go-getter. You guys presented to the Arizona Diamondbacks last weekend. So now that you've done that, as I said, another joint approach here, the likelihood of bringing baseball to New Zealand?
I think there are some really strong possibilities there, but I think it's important that whatever we do around the event is also part of a real staged approach to grow baseball and to grow the economic opportunity of baseball. So if I look at some of the stages, baseball needs a world-class stadium. It doesn't need to be big, but it needs to be a proper baseball diamond. So that's kind of stage one. Second, ability around a high-performance academy, something which actually could be attracting international students, both people wanting to study university but also to study baseball, if you like, to Auckland. Then off the back of that, you look at, okay, well, if we've been able to demonstrate capability in those areas, what could we do around an event? And ultimately, I know Baseball New Zealand would love to have an Auckland-based team in the Australian Baseball League. So I think, again, long-term strategy, very clear that the returns can be sustainable out over a 12-month period, but obviously with a major event being the feature part of that calendar.
Do you think, Brett, that the punters, and this is where I stand, and tell me if I'm off mark here, but just what I'm listening to and when I go around various sporting events is that punters like these one-off events now. They like things that are different, that maybe aren't week-in, week-out events.
I think that's true, Tony. I think there's a balance. I mean, I was at the Blues game last night. Great to see, them playing really well, and we want those really strong franchises in Auckland that are producing a world-class sporting experience every weekend. But I think, like the concept of having bands, coming into Auckland, which is another area that we're involved with, people like the opportunity of seeing some superstars in a one-off kind of event. What we'll always try and do is see if we can develop events that are sustainable year after year. But obviously, with something like Major League Baseball, which is a big professional sporting endeavour, the chances of you getting a team here every year, with our available budgets and with the competing cities and countries that are looking for their attention, is probably unlikely. So it's just balancing that in our portfolio and making sure that, yes, we have those regular events, but every now and then we just deliver something which is a bit of an extravaganza that really piques people's attention.
Before we get on to the business aspect of sport, which I find exasperating how some punters don't get it, I just want to get a blueprint from you, Brett, in terms of, you mentioned to start this, things like tennis and all of these sports, Major League Baseball here, trying to bring an All-Stars game here. Have you guys basically sat around a table here and put down some ideas, some dream lists, some bucket list events you'd like to bring to Auckland?
We have. We've got a team that is bidding for events all of the time, and that, we do a full feasibility on all of the event proposals we get, and we also spend time talking with promoters about what we're looking for. The exciting thing, Tony, for me, is that in the stage of the journey that we're on, we've now got people coming to us from around the world with events that they want Auckland to host. And that's because they've recognised that we have this capability. This week we were just named as one of the 5 finalists for the ultimate sports city in the world, which is a huge honour for us. That involves the Business Sport magazine coming down and doing a full evaluation of Auckland, looking at all aspects of how we host sporting events. So we're on the map. People know that when they bring an event here, if it passes muster for us from a feasibility point of view, that we can deliver the numbers. And we have great support from our broadcasters in making that whole package work. So there's some exciting opportunities in front of us. Can
you give me just a couple of wee little tidbits here in terms of what's been proposed, what's been looked at here?
I can tell you that we are hoping to announce a water sport event in the next couple of months, which will be the first of its type in the world. It'll involve partnership with one of the world's largest brands, and it'll involve bringing some of the world's elite water sport participants to Auckland, and that'll be something that's not our idea, something developed by one of our national associations, and I think that's going to really wow people. And that'll have global profile. English Premier League, a number of proposals around both English Premier League teams and football in general. So that's really exciting.
Well, I think I can tell you this, Brett, and I'm pretty sure on my information here. It's West Ham versus the Phoenix, July 23rd, there or thereabouts at Eden Park, Brett. So let me take that away from you in terms of answering that. But do you think that would sell out Eden Park, that concept?
I think it would. I think there's there's strong interest in the EPL. That's certainly one of the proposals that we're looking at. But there are a number of others, many out into the future, because as you'll be aware, some of the proposals we've got in front of us are, 2016, 17, 18, and part of the benefit of the investment that Council's made in this long-term strategy is we can be looking that far ahead, which is great, because many of these events take a long time to bid for, to do the feasibility for, and we want to make sure that we're constantly refreshing the portfolio to make sure that it is interesting and stimulating for the Auckland and New Zealand public.
Absolutely. Brett O'Reilly with us, the CEO of ATEED, the tourism arm for the Auckland Council. Brett, look at this. I've got Stephen Tyndall on the program this afternoon, so out came the report this week. And it was a report actually commissioned, I'm not sure if you even know this, but Stephen Tyndall put his own money into an independent report into PwC because he was so frustrated that punters still couldn't get their head around money being spent into sport actually does return money to our economy. Does it frustrate you at all that I still hear even some announcers here, Brett, saying, why is ratepayer money ever going into sport? How do we believe these reports that we're getting this amount of value out of them?
It is frustrating. I think, in simple terms, we have to recognise that high-performance sport in New Zealand can be and is in many cases a high-performing part of the economy. So the ED in the ATEED name is economic development. And so when we're looking at sport, yes, we're looking at the GDP and the visitation benefits we get from a particular event like the Nines. But actually what we're also doing is entering into a long-term strategic partnership with the NRL and with New Zealand Rugby League and Auckland Rugby League and the sponsorship family to look at how their investment in the sport can benefit the Auckland economy. And we're going to replicate that same approach across every sport that's interested in that engagement, and we're going to model the numbers, and we're going to keep talking about the numbers until we get the message across that sport is a major contributor to the Auckland economy. And we recently had Greg Clark in Auckland, who is a world-leading expert on cities. And we were talking about what differentiates Auckland from other cities, because it's obviously a globally competitive world and cities are a big part of that. And he actually said to us, I think you guys underestimate just how powerful sport is for the Auckland brand and the Auckland economy. So much of your visitation is driven by sport, so much of your profile is about sport. Rugby World Cup, Eden Park is hallowed turf around the world. People want to come to Auckland to visit Eden Park. And hopefully other venues as well. So I think it's been right in front of us, for all of our lives. It's something that we take for granted because we're so proud of our performance in sport, but we just haven't made that link that actually this is really good for the economy. And there are social benefits, community benefits, but there's actually hard dollar benefits that we generate.
And Brett, can I play devil's advocate? Do you think you can categorically say that, let's say that the half Ironman 70.3, or as you say, a game of rugby playing at Eden Park, that somebody somewhere in the world is going to see that game and therefore identify that place, that event with Auckland and a need to go there?
I can categorically say that. I mean, the work that we've done over 3.5 years in investing in our model for one, getting the hard benefits, calculating those in terms of the dollars. And we use a very conservative model. In the past, I think one of the reasons why this whole area has been, discredited is because cities have thrown around wild numbers. So we focus on the net benefit to Auckland. So the numbers are typically smaller than maybe the numbers that people have heard in the past.
Yeah.
But we can ensure they're accurate. But we also look at a couple of other things. One, what brand profile do we get for Auckland, and we track that really carefully. And lastly, and this is important as well, what does the event do to the livability of the city? I mean, that might be just people feeling good about being in Auckland, people getting out and supporting the event, or the investment that comes in our venues and our facilities as a result of that event coming to Auckland. And I think that combined package is great for Aucklanders, for ratepayers, but it's also really putting Auckland on a world stage. And we've got the evidence to show that, and we get that feedback from the research we do with punters that come here.
Brett O'Reilly, thank you so much for your time. That is Brett O'Reilly, the man in charge of tourism economic development, the arm of the Auckland Council. I'm interested, Brad, what people think about it. So this is where I stand. I don't think it matters what I say in this particular role. And it's pretty obvious from my Tyndall interview that I'm pro money being spent on events. I love the fact, for example, when I look out at the city now, we have the 70.3, we've had the World Cup triathlon events here. Finally, we got the V8s back to Pukekohe, all of that we're starting to turn ourselves into like Melbourne, like Australia, an event city. We're spending some money, we're being proactive, we're being worldly in the way that we're spending our money. Yet, I heard during the week and I listened to Talkback and I read reactions on Facebook of punters still saying, I don't believe it. I don't believe we should ever spend money on sporting events. What a waste of money.
Is that the poll just saying what good does it do me if we get a few people coming into our city off the back of an America's Cup event?
Yeah, I think it is a selfish point of view here.
Yeah.
I think it is a point that we sit back and say there's far more important things to spend money on. Well, society is a worldly round thing here, Brad. Did you like that? A worldly round thing.
Works for me.
Yeah, so you've got all sorts of things that you need to invest in, and one of them, and this is me being selfish because of my job and what I love about sport, is that I think you see benefits. You get this report out and you hear what Brett O'Reilly's saying. We're looking at bringing Major League Baseball, an All-Stars game here. We're looking at bringing an EPL match to Auckland as well. The Nines was a raging success. I don't know that punters get it.
And he didn't bat an eyelid when you mentioned the West Ham game.
No. West Ham, July versus the Phoenix Eden Park. If you want to react to anything Brett's had to say, or I've had to say, or Stephen Tyndall has had to say in regards to this, if you're out there in Radio Land, where do you stand on this particular issue? Do you think you understand there is value and merit in spending money on events and sport? Do you like the fact that ratepayers are doing it? And do you believe it when you see economic impact reports like the one we got this week around what the America's Cup generated for New Zealand? 0800 80 1080, 0800 80 1080. Or are you still steadfast here? This is not the role and right of councils and governments to spend money on sport. I don't get it. I love it. I love it when we have big events. I love when Bruce Springsteen came to Auckland, Brad. I love that Vector Arena's now getting all sorts of different concerts.
Johnny Farnham.
He wasn't that good. Lionel, though, was brilliant. 0800 80 1080. Give me your reaction, guys, and also to what you heard from Stephen Tyndall, investor in Team New Zealand, and very astute businessman, and Brett O'Reilly. Do we back the fact that we're turning our cities and our country into a much more worldly place to live? 0800 80 1080.